Welcome to the world of sci-fi stories, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the channel. Enjoy the listening. Abandoned by the galaxy, an alien race turns to humanity for survival. The disappearance emerges empire. The galaxy was a vast expanse of stars, filled with hundreds of worlds, each with its own story. Among these worlds, this empire once stood tall, an empire like no other. For centuries, their advanced technology and unmatched wisdom made them the most powerful species in the universe. Their ships cruised through space like majestic giants, and their cities were marvels of engineering. The Tsar were known for their peaceful ways, using their power to protect weaker civilizations and bring prosperity to countless planets. But one day, without warning, the Z simply vanished. No one knows exactly when it happened, but their disappearance left a hole in the galaxy's fabric. It wasn't just the loss of their technology, their culture, or their military power. It was the absence of their wisdom, their guidance, and their protection. The universe suddenly felt smaller and more dangerous, and many civilizations who had relied on the Z's strength began to fear the worst. The first signs of the Z's disappearance were subtle communication from their home worlds. Prime began to slow down. The once bustling trade routes that connected Tsar Prime to other planets fell silent. Some ambassadors sent to Tsar Prime reported that their messages went unanswered, while others spoke of strange, eerie silence. When they arrived on the planet in the farthest corners of the galaxy, whispers began to circulate. No one could explain it, but it was clear that the Z had disappeared without a trace. Some believed that they had simply moved on to another part of the universe, perhaps in search of something greater. Others thought they had fallen victim to a terrible disaster, their entire civilization wiped out in one catastrophic event. But the most terrifying theory of all was that the Tsar hadn't disappeared by choice. They had been erased. A mysterious enemy, one that no one had ever heard of, was said to be hunting the Z down. This force, dark and relentless, appeared out of nowhere, destroying everything in its path. No one knew who they were, but their power was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Planets were burned to ash, entire fleets vanished, and no trace of the Tsar could be found for years. The disappearance remained a mystery. Many believed that this had simply given up, retreating into hiding for their own safety. But in the depths of space, a discovery was made that would change everything. A distress signal, faint and barely detectable, came from a distant system. The last place anyone fought to search it was a signal from the Seth. But it wasn't just a call for help, it was a plea, a cry from an ancient race on the edge of extinction. The signal was short, only a few words, but it carried enough information to send shockwaves through the galaxy. "We are not lost," it said, "but hunted. The end is near." It was followed by coordinates, a location far from the core of the galaxy in an uncharted region. Whoever had sent the signal, they had been trying to hide for years, but now they were desperate. Whoever hunted the Zapar was closing in, and they needed help. Any help to survive. The discovery of the signal sent ripples across the galaxy, across many star systems. Powerful leaders and commanders gathered, discussing the implications. The message wasn't just about the Tsar anymore, it was about the future of the galaxy. If a race as powerful as the Tsar could be brought to the brink of extinction, what hope did the rest of the universe have? Humanity, still fresh from its own struggles and wars, had only recently begun to venture beyond its homeworld. Yet now, faced with the news of the Z's desperate plight, humanity stood at a crossroads. The planet Earth had always considered itself a peaceful one, focused on exploration and discovery. But the threat of this unknown enemy couldn't be ignored. Humanity now found itself facing an impossible choice. Should they stay out of it, or should they answer the call, risking everything to help a civilization they knew little about? While the galaxy's greatest minds debated the best course of action, there was one undeniable truth: this, in their final moments, were reaching out to those they had once protected. And for humanity, this meant something bigger than just a chance to help. It was a chance to prove that they were more than just survivors of their own wars. It was a chance to show the galaxy what humans could do when faced with impossible odds. As rumors of the distress signal spread, humanity made its decision. A fleet was assembled, a team of the best soldiers, scientists, and diplomats, all ready to face whatever dangers lay ahead. Their mission was clear: find the Tsar, and if they could save them from the darkness that pursued them, it was a mission that would determine not just the fate of the Tsar, but perhaps the future of the galaxy itself. But as humanity prepared to launch its Rest Resu mission, the true scale of the threat began to reveal itself. What had once seemed like an impossible rescue mission was now a fight for survival. The Tsar may not have been lost, but they were certainly hunted, and the galaxy would soon know the terrifying truth of why the Z had been erased from history. Humanity's first contact. The stars stretched on for millions of light years, but to humanity the distance between them and the last known location was just a matter of choice. As the fleet prepared to venture into uncharted space, the weight of the mission hung heavy on every officer and crew member. They had no idea what awaited them. Only a single faint distress signal from the Tsar had guided their path, and it was clear time was running out. The message spoke of an enemy unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen, but it didn't provide enough details to prepare for the true horrors that left ahead. Captain Sarah Jensen, leader of the mission, stood on the bridge of the flagship Luminara, staring out into the unknown. Behind her, the crew moved with precision, making final adjustments to their vessels, ensuring the fleet was ready for whatever dangers might emerge. The Tsar had been known for their strength, but now humanity was taking on a responsibility greater than any they had ever faced. It wasn't just about saving a species, it was about facing an enemy capable of wiping out entire civilizations. As they entered the coordinates from the distress signal, the crew felt a growing sense of unease. Nothing in their training had prepared them for a mission like this. They had encountered alien life before, but never something this old, this mysterious. Humanity had always been the underdog in the galaxy, but now they were not only racing against time, but against an unknown enemy whose motives were unclear. Days passed as the fleet journeyed through empty space, the stars stretching endlessly before them. The silence was unsettling, and Captain Jensen found herself wondering whether they were making a mistake. Could humanity truly save the Zeph, or would they fall victim to the same fate? The further they traveled, the more isolated they became, and the tension was palpable. The unknown enemy's presence seemed to grow more ominous with every light year. They crossed finally. After what felt like an eternity, the fleet arrived at the coordinates. They had entered a system unlike any they had seen before. It was dark, darker than it should have been, with planets orbiting a dying star. The once thriving civilizations that had called this system home were now nothing but remnants of their former selves. The planets appeared abandoned, the ruins of Zep cities scattered across their surfaces. The crew felt an uneasy chill as they realized they were standing on the edge of history, looking at the remnants of a once great empire. Prepare for scan, Captain Jensen ordered. We need to find any signs of life, anything that could lead us to the Z. The sensors on the Luminara activated, scanning the planets and moons in the system for any signs of activity. For hours they found nothing. No ships, no structures, no energy signatures, just the cold emptiness of space. It was as if the Tsar had simply vanished into thin air. But then a faint signal was detected. It wasn't a distress call this time, but a beacon, weak and flickering, coming from a nearby moon. The fleet's tension escalated as they prepared to investigate. What they found there was beyond anything they had expected. On the moon's surface, buried beneath layers of dust and debris, they discovered an ancient Zipar outpost. It was a shell of what it once was, a place that had clearly been abandoned in a hurry. The structures were half collapsed, and the technology, though still functioning, was in a state of disrepair. The crew moved cautiously, aware that this might be the first real lead they had found. They were getting closer to the truth, but at what cost? "Captain, you need to see this," said Lieutenant Carter, one of the lead engineers, as he examined a piece of Tsar technology. The device was unlike anything humanity had ever seen before. It seemed to pulse with energy, though its purpose was unclear. The walls of the outpost were covered in strange symbols, too complex for human understanding. But one thing was certain: the Tsar had been Here recently, this wasn't just an ancient relic, it was a sign that the Tsar were still out there struggling to survive. As the crew investigated further, they found more disturbing evidence signs of a battle. The outpost had been attacked, its defenders. Overwhelmed burn marks and broken pieces of alien technology scattered across the ground indicated a fierce fight had taken place. It wasn't just a physical battle, it seemed like a race against time. The Tsar had been fighting for their very survival. Then the crew made a chilling discovery: an encrypted message left behind by the Zipar. The message was brief, a warning of the darkness that pursued them. The words were barely legible, as if this had been running out of time when they sent it. The enemy is relentless. We cannot outrun them, we cannot hide, but we are not alone. If anyone hears this, we ask for help, we ask for protection. Humanity, you must come for us. The realization hit Captain Jensen like a blow to the chest. The Tsar weren't just asking for help, they were reaching out to humanity specifically. Somehow this believed that humans might be the last hope for their survival. The crew stood in stunned silence, the weight of the discovery sinking in. They had not only found the Tsar, they had uncovered the truth. Humanity was their only hope. But as the message finished playing, an eerie silence fell over the moon's surface. The stars above seemed to flicker, as if something dark was watching them. Captain Jensen knew that the true test was just beginning. The Tsar had been hunted for so long, and now humanity had become part of their fight for survival. The question now was simple: could humanity protect the Tsar from the darkness that pursued them, or would they be doomed to the same fate? The Z's dark secret, the fleet's arrival on the moon, was only the beginning of the truth they were about to uncover. As the crew continued to explore this the signs of devastation were everywhere. The walls of the crumbling buildings told a story of sudden abandonment, an empire that had been broken apart in a matter of weeks, perhaps days. The Tsar, a race once revered as protectors of the galaxy, had been reduced to nothing more than survivors. Captain Sarah Jensen and her team began to piece together the puzzle. As they continued to dig through the ruins, they discovered an underground chamber sealed off and hidden from plain sight. Inside, the walls were covered in intricate carvings and alien symbols that seemed to tell the history of this in ways that no one had expected. Lieutenant Carter, who had been working with this technology, carefully deciphered some of the symbols on the walls. These aren't just markings, he said, they're warnings about something far worse than any enemy we faced. The Tsar didn't just disappear, they were hunted. The realization came as a shock. Humanity had assumed that the Z's disappearance was the result of an accident, or that they had simply withdrawn, but the truth was much darker. The Tsar had been stalked, hunted like prey by a mysterious alien force. This was no ordinary enemy, it was a relentless, shadowy force that had been following the Tsar for centuries, wiping out entire civilizations in its path. The deeper they delved into the ruins, the clearer it became that this had been aware of this threat for a long time. They had tried to protect themselves, building powerful defenses and seeking allies, but nothing had been enough. The enemy was always one step ahead, and now it seemed that even the great empire was on the brink of collapse. As the team explored further, they uncovered an ancient database, its contents still intact despite the centuries of neglect. The data contained encrypted files that revealed the true nature of the enemy. They were of beings known as the Cellans, a species that fed on the life force of entire planets. The Cellans were not just a threat to the Tsar, they were a force of nature consuming everything in their path, leaving nothing behind but destruction. The Tsar had been their primary target for centuries, and despite all their advanced technology, they had never been able to defeat the Excellence. The creatures didn't rely on technology like the Z did. They were relentless, moving like shadows through the galaxy, attacking with overwhelming force and leaving nothing behind but empty planets. And now, with their empire nearly destroyed, the Tsar were on the verge of extinction. The Z's final plan, recorded in the last few lines of the database, was a desperate one. In their last attempt to save their species, the Tsar had reached out to humanity. The message was clear: help us, and we will help you. We cannot survive alone. Together, we may stand a chance. Captain Jensen's heart sank as she absorbed the weight of the message. The Tsar, once the most powerful race in the galaxy, had fallen to the brink of extinction. They had given humanity the last hope to save them. But it wasn't just about saving a race, it was about stopping the Sullans, a force so terrifying that even the mighty Tsar had been powerless against them. "We can't fail," Jensen said, her voice steady despite the shock. "The Tsar are counting on us, and we need to stop the Excellence before they destroy everything." But as they prepared to leave the ruins and report back to the fleet, something unexpected happened. The faint signals they had been receiving earlier, a cry for help, had stopped. The air grew colder, the stars above flickered, and it felt as though the galaxy itself was holding its breath. Something had changed, and it wasn't for the better. It was then that they heard it, the sound of distant engines, the unmistakable hum of an alien fleet approaching. The Cillian were here. The crew rushed back to the fleet, urgency pressing on them like a weight they could no longer afford to wait. The Cillian had found them, and the time for retreat was over. This was the moment where humanity's fate and the fate of the Tsar would be decided. The battle was about to begin, and the galaxy would never be the same again. Humanity's reluctant decision. As the distant hum of engines grew louder, the crew of the Luminaret scrambled to make preparations. The Sands had arrived, and their relentless approach sent a wave of fear through the entire fleet. Captain Sarah Jensen, normally calm and collected under pressure, felt the weight of the moment more than ever before. This wasn't just a mission anymore. This was a fight for the survival of entire species humanity, and the Tsar included. "Captain, the fleet is ready, but we're facing an enemy unlike anything we've ever encountered," Lieutenant Carter said, his voice laced with uncertainty. "The Z might have been powerful once, but they've been running from the Excellence for centuries. What makes us think we can succeed where they failed?" Jensen's gaze was fixed on the scanner, watching the approaching alien fleet. The Cillian ships were dark, sleek, and terrifying. They had an aura of absolute power, no escape, no hope. But despite the overwhelming fear, there was one thing that kept echoing in Jensen's mind. The Z had trusted humanity. The ancient race, desperate for salvation, had placed their last hope in human hands. That hope had to be enough. "Humanity has survived impossible odds before, Captain," Jensen said, her voice firm. "We fought wars, survived disasters, and come out stronger each time. The Tsar are right. We can't do this alone, but together we stand a chance. We may be the underdogs, but we've never backed down from a fight." The words were meant to inspire, but in truth Jensen wasn't sure she believed them herself. Still, there was no time for doubt. That Sands were coming, and they were hungry. Humanity's decision had already been made. The fleet would fight the Luminara, and the other ships in the fleet gathered in a defensive formation. As the enemy fleet grew closer for the first time, humanity was not the newcomer in the galaxy. They were the defenders, and they would protect the Tsar with everything they had prepared to engage. Jensen commanded, though her heart pounded in her chest. The thought of facing such an unknown, overwhelming force was terrifying, but there was no turning back. The Z's message was clear. This was their last chance, and humanity's too. As the battle loomed closer, the tension was palpable. Humanity's fleet, though advanced, was no match for the Excellence in terms of raw power, but they had one advantage: their ability to adapt, to improvise, and to fight in ways that no one could predict. It was this unpredictability that gave humanity its edge, and it was exactly what they would need to survive. The Cillian ships entered weapons range, and before anyone could blink, the first shots were fired. The battle began with an explosion of energy lighting up the dark expanse of space. Humanity's fleet held strong, its weapon systems unleashing volleys of fire and retaliation. But the Cylons didn't flinch. Their ships seemed to phase in and out of visibility, making them nearly impossible to target. Their attacks were precise, calculated, and devastating. It became clear that this had been right. This enemy was unlike anything humanity had ever encountered. The Cillian ships moved like shadows, their energy weapons tearing through the human FL sleep with terrifying ease. One by one, human ships fell, their hulls pierced by the Cillian deadly attacks. Yet despite the overwhelming odds, humanity fought on. Captain Jensen's voice rang out over the communications channel, rolling her troops were not giving up. "We protect the Zupar. We protect each other, we fight to the last breath on the battlefield. There was no room for fear as the Luminara exchanged fire with its Cillian fleet. The human ships maneuvered with precision. They used every trick they could to stay one step ahead, distracting the Cillians, setting traps and using their superior knowledge of their own technology to push back against the relentless assault. The battle raged for hours, and with every passing minute the stakes grew higher. Yet just as it seemed like humanity might be overwhelmed, a breakthrough came. Jensen took the opportunity. Now hit them with everything we've got, she ordered, and the fleet's remaining ships unleashed a combined assault, catching the Cylon off guard. For the first time since the battle began, the Cylon faltered. The coordinated strike crippled their lead ships, causing them to retreat. But it was far from over. The enemy was retreating temporarily, but humanity knew it wasn't over. The Excellence would return stronger than ever in the aftermath of the skirmish. The fleet regrouped. Humanity had survived the first wave, but the danger was far from over. The Z's fate still hung in the balance, and there was no telling what the Cylons would do next. The crew of the Luminara knew they had to move quickly if they were going to save the Z and protect the galaxy from this terrifying force. As Captain Jensen looked out at the stars, she knew that humanity had made the right decision. The fight wasn't just about survival, it was about standing up for something greater. They had taken the first step, and now there was no turning back. The battle for the galaxy had only just begun. The battle for the Tsar homeworld. Humanity's fleet had won a hard-fought victory, but the cost was high. The Cylons, though temporarily repelled, were relentless. The small victory had given humanity a taste of what was to come, but the true battle lay ahead. The Z's last refuge, their homeworld, was now the focal point of the war. That Cylons would undoubtedly converge on Zipar Prime, and the fate of both the Zipar and humanity was uncertain. Captain Sarah Jensen stood on the bridge of the Luminara, gazing at the map of the galaxy. It flickered on the holo screen. The coordinates to Tsar Prime were set, but there was no relief in sight. They had to move fast. Report, she said, her voice calm but laced with urgency. Fleet is ready, Captain. We've taken some damage, but we can still fight. The Tsar have reinforced the defenses on their planet, but they are stretched thin. The sands are coming fast, replied Lieutenant Carter, his eyes glued to the readouts. Jensen nodded. They couldn't afford to waste time. Set course for Tsar Prime. We have to stop the Xilians before it reached the planet. The Luminara and the rest of the fleet surged forward, cutting through space with determination. As they approached the Tsar homeworld, a sense of foreboding fell over the crew. This would be their final stand, and the odds were stacked against them. The Cylons were relentless, and their advanced tactics had already proven deadly. But humanity had something that Cylons did not: the will to fight, no matter the cost. As they neared Prime, the first wave of Cylon ships appeared on the horizon. Dozens, maybe even hundreds of sleek, shadowy vessels closing in on the planet's atmosphere. The air was thick with tension. Prepare for combat, Jensen ordered. Protect the Tsar at all costs. This is the moment we've been training for. The Luminara joined the other human ships in battle formation. Tsar Prime was a beautiful planet, lush with green for forests, vast oceans, and towering mountains. But that beauty now faced the shadow of annihilation. The first volley of energy beams from the Cylons struck humanity's fleet, followed by a barrage of deadly missiles. The ships rocked under the force of the impact, and explosions lit up the dark void of space. The human fleet responded, firing back with everything they had. The battle was chaotic, ships darting, weaving through the stars, firing and evading in an unrelenting dance of destruction. The Tsar had fortified their planet with powerful defense systems, but it was clear they were no match for the overwhelming force of the Excellence. As the battle raged, Captain Jensen's heart sank. The Z's homeworld was beautiful, but it was becoming a graveyard. Then the unexpected happened. The Tsar, despite their weakened state, launched a series of counterattacks. Their ancient technology, long thought obsolete, was suddenly reactivated. Massive energy cannons fired from the surface of Tsar Prime, blasting apart several Cylon ships. It was clear that the Tsar had not given up entirely. They were fighting to the bitter end. Captain, we're getting additional reinforcements. Lieutenant Carter called out, "It's the Tsar fleet. They're joining the fight." A fleet of Tsar warships emerged from the planet's atmosphere, their massive forms cutting through space like ancient Titans. Though their ships were old, they were built for war, and their advanced energy weapons began to turn the tide of the battle. The Xilians, stunned by the unexpected arrival, faltered for a moment. "Now's our chance," Jensen said, her voice resolute. "Push forward with renewed energy, humanity." And the Tsar pressed their attack. The combined forces fought with everything they had. Humanity's fleet used its adaptability and quick thinking, while the Z fought with a desperation that only came from knowing they were fighting for their very survival. The battle became a fierce, unrelenting struggle with every ship and every life at stake. Despite their best efforts, the Sands were not backing down. Their ships moved like shadows, elusive and deadly, picking off targets with frightening precision. Humanity's forces were pushed to their limits, and the Z's defenses, while powerful, were not enough to completely repel the invaders. The situation grew more dire with each passing minute. As the battle continued, Captain Jensen realized that there was no way they could defeat the Xilians by sheer force alone. They needed a strategy, something that could turn the tide in their favor. "Carter, do you think we can overload the Z's defense cannons?" Jensen asked. Carter looked at the schematics on his console. "It's risky, Captain. The cannons are powerful, but they're unstable. If we overload them too much, we might destroy them along with half the planet. We don't have a choice." Jensen said, "If we don't take out the Xilians now, there won't be anything left to save." With a heavy heart, Carter nodded. "Understood. I'll get to work." Jensen turned to the rest of the crew. "Prepare for a final push. We either win this or we lose everything." The fleet concentrated its fire on the Z's defense cannons, targeting the core systems that powered them. The goal was to trigger an overload that would unleash a massive burst of energy powerful enough to the Scion fleet. But it was a risky move, one that could easily backfire. As the final shots were fired, a massive explosion erupted from the surface of Tsar Prime. A blinding wave of energy surged through space, obliterating a large portion of the Xilian fleet. The remaining Xilian ships were thrown into disarray, their advanced tactics no match for the sudden onslaught. But the victory came at a cost. The Z's defense systems were gone, and much of their home world lay in ruins. Though victorious, had paid a heavy price. Still, they had survived, and with humanity's help, they had won the battle for their planet. Captain Jensen stood on the bridge, watching the aftermath. The Sands had retreated, but the damage was done. The Tsar were no longer the unstoppable empire they once were, but they had found a new ally in humanity. For now, at least, the galaxy was safe. But the fight for the future had only just begun. Unlikely alliances. The battle for Prime had been brutal, but against all odds, humanity and the Tsar had emerged victorious, though not without sacrifice. The remnants of the Dilian fleet had retreated, but the cost of the battle was clear. The Tsar had lost much of their homeworld's infrastructure, and the toll on their people was immeasurable. Their once thriving civilization was now a shadow of its former self, struggling to rebuild from the ashes. In the aftermath of the battle, as the smoke of war began to clear, a new reality emerged. Humanity, having proven their strength and resolve in the fight to protect the Zapar, was now seen as more than just a survivor species. They were an ally, one whose courage and adaptability had turned the tide of the war. The Tsar, once the unquestioned guardians of the galaxy, had become students in this new era of intergalactic cooperation. But the victory came with a new challenge. Despite the Sands retreating, it was clear that they were not truly defeated. The galaxy had seen only the tip of the iceberg, and many understood that a second wave of attacks was imminent. Humanity and the Zep, though united by a shared victory, were still vastly outnumbered by the Xilians, who had fleets spread across the galaxy. The real fight was still ahead of them in a hidden chamber beneath the ruins of Tsar Prime. Captain Jensen met with Zephyr leaders, including Grand Marshal Drar, one of the last of the Empire's great military strategists. The room was dark, the glow of flickering holo screens casting eerie shadows over the ancient stone walls. The atmosphere was heavy, and the weight of the moment was not lost on anyone present. "You've given us a chance to survive," Captain Jensen Draxler said, his voice deep and grally carrying the weight of centuries of wisdom. But we cannot rebuild what we've lost on our own. We will it need more than just your ships and technology. The Excellence will return, and they will come with even greater force. Captain Jensen nodded solemnly. She knew the stakes we'll need. More than just our fleets to win this war. We need allies more than that. We need to unite every force we can find. There's no time to waste. Dark eyes narrowed. The galaxy is fractured. There are races who once feared us who now see us as weak. Many will not come to our aid, but there may be those who will join the fight. If we can prove that this is a fight for all of us, not just this. Jensen considered his words carefully. Humanity had always fought alone, but they had learned that survival was never a solo endeavor. If the galaxy was to stand a chance against the Excellence, they would need to forge alliances in places humanity had never ventured before. In the days that followed, humanity reached out to the most unlikely of ally species that had once been considered enemies or distant rivals. The war had forced everyone to reconsider old hostilities. Among those who responded to the call were the Drar, a fierce nomadic warrior race from the outer rim of the galaxy. The Drar had long been hostile toward both humanity and the Tsar, but their hatred for the Zellans ran even deeper. The Excellence had destroyed their home world years ago, and the Drar had been searching for revenge ever since. The Drar fleet, though small in number, was known for its fearsome fighting prowess. Their ships were crewed by Tsar and human standards, but their warriors fought with a ferocity that could rival any force in the galaxy. For the Drar, joining humanity and the Tsar was not just a matter of survival, it was a matter of vengeance. The Cylon had taken everything from them, and now they had a chance to make things right. At the same time, an even more unexpected ally reached out. An alliance of peaceful non-military species from the central sectors of the galaxy. The Rands, a species known for their intellect and diplomacy, had long avoided conflict, but the threat of the Zellans, the universal enemy, had forced them to act. The rebellion brought with them knowledge of ancient technologies and a vast network of resources, which, though not as powerful in terms of military might, would prove invaluable in the fight against the Excellence. In a historic moment, humanity, the Tsar, the Drar, and the Ralland formed the first true coalition of races in the galaxy. It was an uneasy alliance born from desperation and necessity, but it was an alliance nonetheless. The galaxy had seen peace for too long, but now, under the shadow of the Scion threat, these races would fight side by side, no matter their past differences. As the newly formed coalition prepared for the next wave of Scion assaults, Captain Jensen stood at the head of the fleet. Once again, this time, however, the fleet was not just humanity's. It was a united front, a gathering of species from across the stars, each bringing their own strengths and contributions to the fight. They had learned from the Z's fall that survival depended on unity, that Sands had learned to destroy by dividing, and now the galaxy was learning that only through cooperation could they stand a chance. That Cylon may have underestimated us, Jensen said to her crew and new allies, her voice steady and resolute, but we are more than the sum of our parts together. We will show them that no matter how dark the galaxy becomes, we will fight to the end. We will protect our homes, our people, and each other, and we will win. The fleet set course for the next battle, a battle that would decide the fate of the galaxy. With unlikely allies by their side, humanity, the Seer, the Drar, and the Rebellion stood united, ready to face the greatest threat the galaxy had ever known. The darkness was vast, but it was not infinite, and the light of their unity would shine brighter than ever before. Humanity's triumph and a new beginning. The alliance of humanity, the Tsar, the Drar, and the Rebellion had formed a formidable coalition, but they still faced a daunting enemy, the Cylons. Now, aware that the galaxy was not as fractured as they had hoped, began to gather their forces for an all-of assault on the united front. They underestimated the power of unity, the one thing they could never break. The coalition's forces assembled in the heart of the galaxy, in a region of space untouched by the chaos of war. Tsar Prime, despite its destruction, became the staging ground for the final battle. The remnants of this once great empire stood as a testament to their resilience. Humanity, once a species struggling to survive, now stood as an equal among the galaxy's greatest powers. Captain Sarah Jensen stood on the bridge of the Luminara, looking out at the vast fleet assembled before her, ships of every shape and size, from the sleek advanced Tsar vessels to the crude yet deadly Drar warships lined up alongside the human fleet. The Rebellion ships, though not built for combat, provided essential logistical support and advanced intelligence. Together, they formed an unbreakable wall of defense against the coming storm. Captain, that Cillian fleet is approaching, Lieutenant Carter reported. His voice was calm, but the tension was palpable. Jensen nodded, her mind sharp. Everyone knows their role. We don't just fight to survive. We fight to protect everything we've worked for. We've already proven that we can stand against the darkness. Now it's time to end it. The massive Xilian fleet loomed. In the distance, their ships, dark and terrifying, filled the horizon, blocking out the stars. Their weapons, advanced and devastating, had obliterated entire civilizations before, but now they faced an enemy united in purpose, an enemy that would not back down. The battle began with a deepening roar of weapons fire. The Excelens moved in tight formations, their ships swarming toward the coalition like a pack of hungry wolves. They fired without hesitation, their energy weapons ripping through the space between them and the defenders. The Luminara and the other human ships responded with equal ferocity, launching missiles and firing plasma beams into the Cillian onslaught. The Zethar, though weakened from the earlier battles, were a fierce presence on the front lines. Their powerful warships unleashed barrages of energy blasts that tore through the silent ships. The Dreer, never once to shy away from battle, plunged into the fray with brutal aggression, their ships taking on a suicidal charge, ramming into the Cilli lines and causing devastating explosions. Despite their primitive technology, the Drykar's sheer violence and tenacity made them a force to be reckoned with. In the midst of the chaos, Captain Jensen saw the most crucial part of the battle unfold: the united front of species working together, coordinating their efforts in ways that no one had thought possible. The Rands, though not fighters themselves, used their advanced intelligence to provide real-time data on Cillian ship movements and weaknesses. Their strategists pinpointed key targets, giving the coalition's fleets the edge they needed to strike decisively. But the Cellans were relentless. As the battle raged on, it became clear that the coalition was outmatched in terms of firepower. The Cillian fleet was enormous, and their ships were designed to overwhelm. With sheer force, humanity's ships were beginning to buckle under the pressure. In a final desperate push, Captain Jensen gave the order: all ships target their command vessels. If we don't break their leadership, we lose everything. The fleet shifted its focus. That Science command ships, colossal and heavily protected, were at the heart of the fleet. If they could take them down, it might disrupt the Cillans' ability to coordinate their forces. The combined fleets surged forward, their weapons firing relentlessly at the Science command ships. As the battle reached its climax, a massive explosion rocked the center of the Cillian formation. The flagship of the Cillian fleet, a dark, massive vessel, erupted in a shower of sparks and debris. As the coalition forces struck with everything they had, the loss of their flagship sent shockwaves through the Shan ranks, and for the first time they hesitated. Their once coordinated movements faltered as their leadership crumbled. Jensen watched as the Cillian, disoriented and leaderless, began to retreat. The coalition did not let up. The remaining Science ships were pursued, their retreating forces slowly disbanding as they fled into the darkness of space. The war was over. The silence that followed the battle was almost deafening. The stars, once hidden by the shadow of war, now seemed to shine more brightly than ever before. The coalition forces, though battered and broken, had. In the aftermath of the battle, the leaders of the Tsar Drar and Rebellion gathered alongside humanity to discuss the future. They had secured victory, but the cost had been steep. Many ships had been lost and countless lives had been sacrificed. Still, they had emerged from the darkness victorious. They had proven that unity was the strongest force in the galaxy. Captain Jensen addressed the gathering, standing tall and proud. "We did," she said, her voice carrying across the room, "not just for humanity, but for every species who believed that the darkness would not win. Together, we've shown the galaxy that we will fight for each other, no matter the odds. This is just the beginning of a new chapter, a chapter of peace, unity, and cooperation." The Zapar, once the greatest empire in the galaxy, now stood as equals among other species, the Drar having found Their revenge knew that they could now look to the future, and the Revaliant who had stayed on the sidelines for so long were now ready to help rebuild the galaxy they had once kept at arm's length. Humanity, though small compared to the ancient civilizations, had proved its worth. They were no longer just survivors. They were heroes. The victory was a symbol of what could be achieved when species, regardless of their differences, work together for a common cause. The galaxy, once divided and full of fear, now looked toward a brighter future. It was a future forged through sacrifice, courage, and unity, a future where no matter the enemy, hope would always shine through the darkness. The fight had been long and hard, but humanity had earned its place. Among the stars,